Imagine walking into a family home where the youngest child becomes the unofficial therapist, the unpaid babysitter, the silent coffee server for stressed adults, an entire invisible role that nobody ever coded into a childhood resume. In these households, the concept of play gets buried under endless chores and unexpected emotional labor. The child is no longer a dreamer but a little adult, the brain circuitry rewired to function as a reflexive caregiver, a phenomenon we call parentification. Act like a neuroarchaeologist. Dig through those neural layers where empathy, responsibility, and the urge to fix all collapse into a single, exhausting archetype: the emotional fixer, the childhood job, the role inversion. In this video, we'll uncover how this ancient script written in our skulls still writes our adult lives, pushing us toward burnout, and reveal tangible ways to readjust the script before it erases the very child you once were. Stay tuned, because the next 10 minutes could be the first real diagnosis of your own forgotten self. The role inversion: how growing up too fast forced you to take care of those who should have cared for you. Imagine a 6-year-old stepping into a dim kitchen, turning stale meals into nourishment as if by magic. Behind that tiny figure sits a whole family routine: laundry, bills, and the quiet sighs of a parent who can't weigh the decision when the child's really weighing the future. In these moments, the child doesn't just help, they become the engine that keeps the family's heart beating. The child who steps into the role of the emotional fixer often learns the diary of the adult, late-night conversations, the gloss of a shared secret. Because parents are preoccupied, the ripple of emotional turmoil quickly finds its echo in the child's ears. It's not just a small talk, it's a full-scale emotional labor that shifts the child's balance toward adult responsibilities, losing the playground, the free time. When a parent falls ill or becomes vulnerable, the child's shoulders automatically fill the void, becoming the support lifeline, the voice that convinces an elderly parent to take their medication on schedule. The flip side of that role inversion can be seen when a toddler's neighbor's dog loses an owner. The child is tasked with persuasion. Ask the neighbor if the dog should be let out. The simple question becomes a web of negotiation, a micro-situation sparking problem-solving that usually adults handle alone. Along with such tasks, a child with an elderly parent often deals with finances, opening a new bank account, learning to parse expense reports, or even drafting a will. These tasks accumulate, creating a childhood job that looks similar to a part-time eldercare or a fintech intern, yet it is built on an unearned, skewed trust. Years later, those same individuals hit the same high-stakes pressure points that caused them to grow up early, only now as an adult who made the arbitration station the center of their life. The neural circuit that survived this early intervention locks into burnout mode. The brain's bus builds, not only contacts icon-like social screens but also enumerates mental fatigues rapidly. A typical sign surfaces: the formerly resilient little adult suddenly feels parched, yawning during meetings, doubting decisions that were once basic. A history of having learned complex human models while still studying ABCs logically dissolves into constant emotional juggling. Euphoria traded for a perpetual drain. One look at modern data shows a trend. Adults who recalled a parent-like responsibility before 15 report elevated cortisol levels in mid-career. The coping threads they used, gradual negotiation, deep listening, do not map neatly onto adult problem-solving frameworks. Instead, these people develop a sense of always-on stance that prolongs exhaustion. When their children eventually require support, the role flips back again, perpetuating an infinite caregiving cycle. The act of swapping interests is no longer a parenting flip card. It's now a recurring script. A little adult has nurtured under parental constraints, only to find adult life demanding that same undertaught skill set, fluidly yet unstoppably. In so doing, they transform adult burnout from a distant headline into an everyday reality, a brand new, often forgotten fact that the anchor of care isn't always the one who created the anchor. The emotional fixer: why your brain prioritized reading others' moods over developing your own identity. Over a quarter of children under 12 routinely keep a mood meter running in the kitchen, the living room, sometimes the bedroom. If you line up those youngsters, each one already has a job description stamped on the back of their head: monitor, mediate, calm. Their neural circuitry has reorganized, prioritizing the synchrony of others over the room for self that most toddlers enjoy. When you hear the phrase emotional fixer, imagine a small brain that serves as a traffic cop. Signals from moms, dads, or even siblings are punctuated into a steady countdown of so arranged thing. The hand that waves the boohoo of a parent, so often, eventually becomes the hand that waves it for themselves. During those formative years, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning, self-reflection, and identity, doesn't get the usual playtime. Instead, the amygdala, the part that senses threat and comfort, spikes in activity. It learns to read crossed eyes, wobbling voices, and guilty sighs. As the brain's primary survival map shifts from self-care to maintain others' calm, the child's story of self begins to fade. The narrative that was once about what am first, if anything, turns into, look, first manage this, now more will thrive. Neuroarchaeology of the child's mind shows layers of this role inversion. The first layer, the caregiver's ghost, is visible in a hypervigilant body posture and an ability to decode vague cues, like a firefighter learning to smell the faintest hint of smoke. The second layer is a depleted autobiographical memory. Milestones like first word or first day of school often sit beside a mental scratchboard marked by the parent's illness, sibling's tantrum, or financial drift. The third layer is identical emotional regulation fibers that are worn thin because the child was wired to soothe. The consequences are tangible. Adults raised as emotional fixers report chronic exhaustion, a sense that they are always on reserve, and an identity crisis where being self feels like a foreign language. Studies link this pattern to higher rates of depression, anxiety, and burnout. When burnout hits, the brain no longer plays the energetic adolescent but a weary adult who cannot switch off. Sleep stalls, migraines hook in, and the feeling of firstum still not enough echoes louder. It may feel like a curse, but millennia of evolution have prepared brains to adapt. The good news is that rewiring is possible. Thought processing therapy moves the brain from others first to self first. Practicing setting boundaries, even for a single sentence like first am not responsible for how you feel, but first feel, signals that self can have a voice. Mindfulness, quick breathing, and attaching personal labels to emotions, kinda drags to here, reteach emotional ownership. Gradually, the child-turned adult unearths buried chapters of their own story, slow as a delicate fossil, but unmistakably present. The childhood job, how being a little adult created a lifelong cycle of burnout and hyperresponsibility. Picture a 9-year-old who sits at the kitchen table, notebook open, and answers the family's constant stream of questions and worries. That kid is a growing little adult, and the place of that role can become a lifelong job. When a child steps into that position, the brain's emotional circuitry rewires. The nervous system learns to trade its own needs for the needs of others, forging a pattern called role inversion. The child's internal narrative shifts: regulatory, caretaker, consensus builder. That mental model is carried into adulthood, becoming a self-fulfilling script. Take the story of Emily, who grew up with a mother who worked long hours and a younger brother who suffered from a chronic illness. By grade school, Emily managed medications, scheduled appointments, and soothed sibling tantrums while still attending classes. She started setting boundaries for herself when she turned 12, realizing she could not shoulder every family crisis. But the habit left a scar. When Emily later expected moves from her own parents, she felt unease because her vocabulary for need a break had barely developed. She took on every new responsibility at her first job, saying yes to overtime, extra projects, and volunteer gigs. The cumulative weight of these childhood jobs spiraled into chronic fatigue. The emotional fixer role trains the brain to anticipate crises, even when the problem is just a minor tweak. The same brain circuitry that prepared the child to resolve parents' conflicts generates a compulsion to solve adult conflicts as well. This constant hyper-responsibility manifests as overcommitment, difficulty saying no, and a tendency to dismiss personal stress signals. The result? An adult who runs on social currency until that currency is exhausted. Burnout. Signs of this lingering default mode begin with physical symptoms: headaches, sleep disruption, stomach pain. Emotionally, the adult feels a persistent sense of overwhelm, a shaky sense of self-worth tied to productivity, and a feeling that their needs are secondary. In relationships, they may repeatedly adopt the caregiver script, expecting partners to copy them, while silently drowning in their own unmet needs. Healing requires two fundamental shifts. First, the adult must acknowledge the childhood job as a skill, not a moral failing. Second, they must cultivate self-care rituals that retrain the nervous system: boundaries, scheduled downtime, and the practice of sharing emotional load with others. With consistent practice, the adult replaces the hyper-responsibility loop with a balanced, reciprocal partnership between self and community. The biology of guilt: why your nervous system treats saying no as a threat to your survival. When a child learns that refusing to help means their family crumbles, the saying no is encoded as a biological signal of imminent threat. The amygdala spikes, sending a white noise alarm to the hypothalamus. The pituitary releases ACTH, and cortisol floods the bloodstream. Along comes a cascade that prepares muscles for sprint or shelter, a fight or flight mode designed for predators, not for parental demands. Even a tiny denial can trigger a flurry of adrenaline, making the child's heart pound as if the house itself were collapsing. Short sentences feel eerily appropriate here, because each one mimics the rapid pulse of a stress response. In everyday life, the brain's pattern of no equals danger overwrites logic. The hippocampus, which normally stores balanced memories, becomes cluttered with images of a parent's tears flickering each time the child rejects an ask. Somatic symptoms appear: tight chest, racing heart, consistently lining the path from refusal to self-care abandonment. Longer observations reveal how the nervous system develops this overattachment. An overactive sympathetic branch keeps the nervous system primed for aggression to a stimulus that never existed, a parental need. The child's autonomic system's baseline shifts upward. Their baseline cortisol level rises. When the baseline is so high, everyday stress becomes amplified, and the thinker cannot discern genuine personal limits. The tie-down between hearing no and confronting an imaginary threat means that adult figures may never learn to step back. Each refusal is rehearsed as a fracture of care. The emotional fixer habit locks into place. The brain rewards a child that says yes with a dopamine hit for sustenance, not moral courage. Over time, that reward pathway hijacks decision-making circuits in the prefrontal cortex. Adult behavior that includes setting personal boundaries provides a threat signal. The brain flips from a reward framework into a survival blueprint. Result? Children, now adults, feel powerless and exhausted. They collapse under the invisible weight of their childhood job. An adult experiencing burnout might find that their nerve endings still react to unwillingness, as if they are defending against a physical fight or a sudden ecological hazard. The biology can explain why that hit to the chest is not guilt, but a deep-rooted survival reflex forged in an early, caregiver-driven environment. Resigning from the job, practical steps to stop fixing everyone and finally reclaim your own life. By the time most adults leave the basement of their childhood, they have already catalogued 3 untended emotional artifacts: sibling arguments, parental stress, and the endless stream of household crises. Those artifacts, repackaged as worries and assignments, clutter the mind until a single, irresistible event forces a reset. That moment of shock, perhaps a lawsuit, a health scare, or an eye-poking revelation about burnout, knocks the door open. The first step to resigning from a childhood job is to excavate the ruins of the emotional fixer. Start by writing down every instance in the past year where you stepped into a caregiving role that wasn't yours. Do this in 1 page, no columns, just raw entries. Then, read the list aloud as if you're a paleontologist brushing off ancient bones. Notice patterns. First mediated dad's argument with mom. First sorted my younger sister's school papers. First smoothed over my stepfather's erratic moods. When you see the repetition, the role inversion becomes visible, like a fossilized skeleton hidden under the mud. Next, decide how to lay new foundations. Boundaries are the building blocks. Identify 1 or 2 areas, perhaps financial dealings or scheduling commitments, where you will refuse to override a non-document request. Say, with a calm, firm tone, "First, I'm happy to help outline an event, but first I'm not able to coordinate the entire thing." The claim of refusal may feel like a small casualty, but it is a deliberate loss of a resource that the emotional fixer had been hoarding. Practice detaching by shadowing the simple process once per week. Set a timer and monitor your reactions. Short, long. During this transition, enlist a companion, therapy, or a support group dedicated to family role reversal. A therapist trained in family systems can help you decode the signals that trigger the impulse to fix. A group of peers who have also walked this path offers validation, and hearing how others carved out personal space can serve as a concrete map. In the meantime, carve out a self-care slot, 30 minutes of diaphragmatic breathing, a walk, or a hobby that has nothing to do with caregiving. Treat this time as a sacred temple. Access it without apology. Finally, invest in a professional pivot that aligns with your interests rather than the needs of others. This doesn't mean quitting your current job immediately. Instead, start mapping a career ladder that includes side projects, continuing education, or networking in a field that excites you. The act of planning for a new path signals to your brain that you are the master of your own narrative, not merely a caretaker. Carry the artifact of burnout away and replace it with a new artifact, a portfolio of personal achievements that no one else required you to create. Imagine a playground where the swing is a cliff, the slide a safety line you maintain for everyone else, and the jump rope your morning medicine cabinet. When the adults in your life were too tired, even too fragile, to care for themselves, your own arms became a lifeline. That's the truth behind parentification. First VE been digging through those layers like a neuroarchaeologist, from the sticky memories of whispering first'll fix it to the stoic smiles that hid the storm. 3 things pop out of the dust. First, the role inversion. You were the child who set the alarm, the one who tucked in the others, the quiet problem solver. The childhood job was full-time, unpaid, and never measured by growth charts. Second, the emotional fixer. Your brain wired itself to listen, soothe, and reorganize on the fly. You carried a day's worth of emotional ballast in your chest, a subtle punch drunk with a steady heartbeat. Third, when the weight finally reaches the adult body, it barrels down as burnout. The same exhaustion that did you at 5 never quite washed away. It shifted into work, relationships, health, and the slow, relentless drumming of life's demands. If that sounds like something you've lived through, you're not alone. The patterns are the same whether you're running a household, a business, or just a world that keeps turning. So, what's next? Hit that subscribe button so we keep digging deeper. Drop a comment. Share a word that describes the invisible load you carried. We're about to uncover how to start turning those ancient bones into pathways for self-care. In the next video, we'll map out practical tools, mini rituals to rebuild boundaries, ways to reparent you, nurturing, but with safety, and a simple morning routine that reclaims your psionic energy. Until then, remember, the chair you sat on was never meant to hold you forever. You've got a whole future to renovate.